A people with green skin, antennae, and pointy ears that create magical orbs that grant you one wish when they are gathered together. Who are they? Well, to answer that, hello there everybody, I'm Blackenfist and this is the birds and the bees of Dragonball, where I talk about the little known to the surprising things about the Dragon Ball universe. Today we're going to be having a rundown of one of the most prominent races in the Dragon Ball universe, which are the Namekians, the people that are responsible for creating the objects that this whole series is named after, the Dragon Balls. Now the most prominent Namekians in Dragon Ball are obviously Piccolo and Kami, who at one point were just one person. And this Namek apparently got to Earth by spaceship a long time ago, but the really interesting thing is that when we actually go see Namek, it's not a very technologically advanced place. The Nameks don't seem to have a lot of technology. So how is it that they were able to send the nameless Namek, who became Piccolo and Kami, to Earth? Well, as we see in the series, there was a very devastating natural disaster, catastrophe that happened on Namek that killed all of the Namekian population except for Guru and the Nameless Namek. Guru, who stayed on the planet, the Nameless Namek was sent to another planet. This catastrophe not only devastated the population, but also devastated their civilization, because apparently before this natural disaster, the Nameks were a very technologically advanced race, enough to build spaceships that could, traverse the galaxy, like we saw with the one that went on to Earth. And the Daizenshu says that they also traded with other races, so they were not isolated. And we could see this, that we have evidence as this to when Vegeta and Nappa came to Earth, they recognized Piccolo as a Namek. So the Nameks definitely weren't isolated. They were in this intergalactic community, you could say. Now, the Nameks in general are of good of nature. They're not really, there's no evil Nameks. The only reason the Nameless Namek, the reason he had an evil side that eventually became Piccolo was because he was corrupted by humans. But when we go see the Nameks on Namek, they really aren't evil in nature. In nature, they're all good. And another thing about their nature that there's been a lot of discussion about is, now it's been pointed out concretely that Nameks only need to drink water to survive. They do not need to eat food, they do not need to eat anything but drink water. But there's several instances, like the driving episode where Piccolo complains about eating fish, where people will say that's contradictions, and yeah, I think so, but there's other instances in where Nameks are depicted eating food, like in Piccolo's childhood, he was seen eating fish. Piccolo Daimo, when he finally took over the world, essentially, and went into his new castle, he was trying to prepare a feast for everybody, or for himself. So there's been a lot of speculation that Nameks, even they don't have to eat, but they can eat for pleasure, which I do think, I guess it could make sense, considering the fact we actually do see Nameks eating. Even though it was early on in the series, we do see them eating, we do see them doing intent to eat, so I guess that's the best explanation we got. They eat for pleasure. However, I do think that a lot of these examples are not in the manga, so you could always, that's a canon issue, which is another episode for another day. But another thing that interests me about the Namekian anatomy is their aging. Namekians live to be very long lives. They have very long lifespans. When Guru died, he was around 500 years old. Kami was centuries old as well. But that's not what really intrigues me. What intrigues me is when they become full grown. Because when Piccolo Daimo gave birth to Piccolo Jr., it was only 3 years until the next World Martial Arts Tournament, and in those 3 years, Piccolo went from being an egg to being fully grown, essentially, to being Goku's size, being Goku's intelligence, to being, he essentially absorbed so much knowledge in that time and became much physically, essentially fully grown. But then later on in the series, we see a Namekian like Dende in like the Frieza saga who's a kid, and then we see him later on in the Cell Saga, and he's still a kid. He didn't change at all. Now, that to me is a bigger contradiction because, dang, I mean, that's a huge disparity there. I mean, we have one that's literally like just growth spurring the hell out of it, and the other one's just that's just stunted. However, I do think that there's an explanation and it has to do with the Namekian castes. There are two Namekian castes, the Dragon Clan and the Warrior type. The Dragon Clan Namekians are the ones that essentially are the elders. They have the magical powers, they have the healing abilities. They are the ones that can create Dragon Balls. And Kami was a Dragon type Namekian. Piccolo, on the other hand, is a Warrior type Namekian, as well as Nail, another prominent one, who obviously excel at a lot of martial arts and a lot of Warrior type things. Now, when Piccolo fuses with Kami, he's essentially a mix between the Dragon Clan and a Warrior type. But my speculation is that the reason Piccolo grew up so fast and Dende so, long, or took him a while, is because Dende is a Dragon Clan and Piccolo is a Warrior type. So there's two prominent ones. There's also the issue of mutated Nameks who kind of poke holes and maybe plot holes that Nameks really, how is it that Nameks are able to just give birth to these like creatures that we saw King Piccolo do? And the speculation is that, well, King Piccolo is not really a normal Namek. He is an evil Namek, which is extraordinary on its own, because Nameks in nature almost can't be evil. So Piccolo, in a sense, has already been mutated, and because of that, he produces these mutated Nameks, per se. But anyway, I hope that you have enjoyed this and that you have learned something, or maybe I've said something that you haven't known about the Nameks before. But anyway, this has been the Birds and the Bees of Dragon Ball. I'm Blackenfist, and I'm out, man.